Hello, today's Bible study comes from Acts chapter 22, verses 22 through 30, and reads as follows. The crowd listened to Paul until he said this. Then they raised their voices and shouted, "Rid the earth of him, he's not fit to live." As they were shouting and throwing off their cloaks and flinging dust into the air, the commander ordered that Paul be taken into the barracks. He directed that he be flogged and interrogated in order to find out why the people were shouting at him like this. As they stretched him out to flog him, Paul said to the centurion standing there, "Is it legal for you to flog a Roman citizen who hasn't even been found guilty?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. "What are you going to do?" he asked. "This man is a Roman citizen." The commander went to Paul and asked, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" "Yes, I am," he answered. Then the commander said, "I had to pay a lot of money for my citizenship, but I was born a citizen," Paul replied. Those who were about to interrogate him withdrew immediately. The commander himself was alarmed when he realized that he had put Paul, a Roman citizen, in chains. The commander wanted to find out exactly why Paul was being accused by the Jews, so the next day he released him and ordered the chief priest and all the members of the Sanhedrin to assemble. Then he brought Paul and had him stand before them. Uh-oh. Now, this is when the crowd is upset with Paul's message. And they had listened to the message. And it said, and they listened to him until this word. This crowd, remember, had tried to kill Paul. And they were listening to him with his, I want to call it his sermon, his whole sermon. And then it says they erupted. They went crazy over the saying of one word. And that's when he said, Gentiles. Remember back in 21, the Jewish mob was outraged at the thought about God being the God of Gentiles too. God's salvation could be given to them too, those Gentiles. And Paul had told them, we just read it. Then he said to me, "Depart, for I will send you far from here to the Gentiles." See, they were upset because God would not do that for the Gentiles. He was just God to the Jews. And Paul told them that he was told by the Lord to go to the Gentiles. And they were into Paul until that point, because it went against how they felt and what they should have and what they shouldn't give. Now, the problem was they didn't really have a problem with the Gentiles becoming Jews. But them becoming Christians like they became Christians, well, that kind of made them mad. And it made them mad because now we are equal in their mind. They had their ways, and if you became a Jew and then went through their way and did all this, that's fine. But with that same salvation being offered to them as it was offered to them, that made them equal in their mind, and it made them mad. And if you remember Galatians 3:28, for there is neither male nor there's neither Jew nor Gentile, male nor female, because we are all one in Christ Jesus. There's the verse smacking you in the face. And this is making them mad. They upset with Paul for even saying this. So while they sitting there upset, they say, "Away with such a fellow." Uh-oh. Get out. Get him out of here. From this earth. That means kill him. they want to get him, for he is not fit to live. That tells you again, they meant to kill him. So the commander ordered him to be brought into the barracks. There was a problem, and the commander wanted to know and said that he should be interrogated or examined under scourging, which means beating, so that he might know why they shouted so against him. And when Paul, they said he should be brought to the barracks, this was strange for the commander. Paul hadn't done anything. He addressed the group. He told them what was going on. And Paul was talking in a language that the commander didn't know. But he saw the crowd go crazy. Remember, he's talking in Arabic, Hebrew. But when it was explained to him, he must have said, that's crazy. He said, that's crazy that you hate the Gentiles this much. And don't forget, guess what the commander was? So Paul gets examined under scourging. It suggested that Paul be beaten with the scourge. That's a bad beating. And usually, when you got beat with a scourge, not just the flogging, but the scourging, you usually died, crippled, body tore wide open. It was bad. It was not like just getting flogged. Don't get it confused. It was usually something that took you out of here. And that's what they said they wanted anyway. So this was going to be brutal. But the thing about this is it couldn't happen to Roman citizens. It could happen to anybody else, but it couldn't happen to Roman citizens. Lord providing and knowing what to do and having a plan for us and everything else. And here it goes. And as they bound him with thongs, Paul said to the centurion who stood by, is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and condemned? Answers no. But Paul also knew the laws. Paul was a smart man. Do not forget that. So he brought it to the attention of him. He said, hey, is it lawful for you to scourge a man who is a Roman and uncondemned? Now, remember, Paul was tied. His hands were tied. He was around a wooden pole, and his back was probably wide open so it could split the skin open. You got to just picture a little bit of how this beating was going to take so you could know, one, it was going to be a bad beating. And Paul knew how to get out of it. He got that. He knew it. And when he asked him, it kind of threw him. Because when the centurion heard that, he went and told the commander, saying, take care what you do, for this man is a Roman. Uh-oh. He's a Roman. Can you do this to him? And when this became known, hey, he couldn't do it. He knew it. He was like, oh, hold it. It was wrong to beat. And I mean really wrong to beat a Roman. And this was a violation of Roman rights. And even to bind a Roman citizen without due process, without court, without a hearing, without a trial. And Paul didn't have any of these things. I don't know if Paul didn't divulge it then, but he knew to divulge it now. And to be honest with you, they had already violated Paul just by binding him, as I said. And if you look back, and you'll see it as we read, but you'll see where the commander came up to him. And 21 and 33, as we read a few, maybe 4 days back, then the commander came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and he asked who he was, and he had done. Remember, the prophet came to Paul and said this was going to happen to him. Paul didn't divulge it even then. But he was violated by Roman custom and Roman law. And then he says, tell me, are you a Roman? Well, Paul didn't lie about it. And why would he? So the commander just asked him, are you a Roman? And Paul told him, that's me. And he says, with a large sum, I obtained this citizenship. And the commander wondered how Paul, after getting beaten, looking like he did, could obtain his citizenship. But he tells him, I was born a citizen. See, this wasn't supposed to happen to a Roman citizen. That's why there's some questions here, because Paul was already chained and beat and getting ready to get beat again. And he said, I was born a Roman citizen, but I was born a citizen. Somebody in his family must have been some type of citizen there. Did something on the good for Rome. Something was there. I don't know how he became, but it tells you he was. Paul was different. And remember, Gamaliel was his teacher. He was with the Sanhedrin. So remember, he got gifted. And Paul was a devout Jew. But he was a Roman citizen. Remember, Paul got to move freely. And God knew that. So he used Paul in a special way. See, Paul could travel freely. And remember, we all got special things the Lord uses, and Paul's is being used by the Lord. You present it, he'll pull it out of you. So the commander was afraid after he found out that Paul was a Roman, and because he had bound him, because this was against the law, he had violated him. And he was worried about himself because he had done the wrong thing. So the next day, because he wanted to know for certain why he was accused by the Jews, he released him from his bonds. Trying to fix things. And commanded the chief priests and their council to appear. I bring in some backup now because I messed up, but I done freed them. I'm trying to get things straight. And they brought Paul down and sat him before them. This Roman commander had to be somewhat of a decent person because he could have just went on and took him out. I ain't saying he was perfect, none of us are, but he did start going through the proper steps once he found out who Paul was. So once again, the Lord provided. You may not understand that Roman commander was provided because he could have been there with one that didn't care. I wouldn't have asked. And he didn't know everything that was going on with Paul and his crowd. And then the dispute between him and the crowd. But he was looking for fairness, equity that was correct. And he heard Paul. And in his mind, he was probably waiting for the truth to decide what he was going to do. So they commanded the chief priests and all the council to appear, and they brought Paul down and set him before them. And Paul sat down. This was him getting ready to talk to them. And he said, hey, this ended in a riot. But Paul spoke before the Sanhedrin, the council, the next day. And just to let you know, the Sanhedrin was the big Jewish council, big wigs. And Paul gets to speak in front of them. And Paul just had to tell them what was going on. Now, this was a hard one, though. Because you might have thought this was good to speak in front of them, but remember, he was no longer doing things their way. And he had a new plan from the Lord. So Paul had changed from what he started out as to who he is now. So we'll see how this goes in our next lesson. Amen.